over 22,600 feet, nearly 4.3 miles beneath the Philippine Sea. A submersible pilot was descending into complete darkness. He was looking for a ship that had been missing for 78 years. And the way they found her wasn't by finding the ship at all. It was by finding 3 torpedo tubes, standing upright, all alone on the ocean floor. And what those torpedo tubes told the search team changed everything. The reason that ship was findable at all, in one of the most remote stretches of ocean on Earth, comes down almost entirely to one thing. Someone had to do the detective work before a single submersible ever entered the water. Over the last few years, I've had multiple opportunities to talk with Park Stephenson, the historian who led the archival research that made both the Johnston and the Roberts discoveries possible. And what he described is not what most people picture when they think about deep sea exploration. You see, it doesn't start with technology, and it doesn't start with submersibles or sonar. It starts with paper. Survivor accounts written decades ago. Japanese fleet logs. Position reports from a battle so chaotic that no two sources placed the same ship in the same location. I'm talking about the Battle of Leyte Gulf. And it definitely was not a clean engagement. It was hours of smoke screens, high-speed maneuvering, contradictory orders, and ships going down across dozens of miles of open ocean. Reconstructing where the Samuel B Roberts actually sank, precisely enough that a submersible could search for her, meant working backwards through all of that chaos.
So to try to find these wrecks, I'm kind of like a detective at a crime scene. I'm pulling on every little piece of evidence I can. This can be historical documents, official reports. We even can build upon the work of previous explorations in the area. In the end, though, as with almost every other wreck, it all comes down to a certain amount of luck.
Now, what the Caladan Oceanic team found first, before they found the ship, was not what they were looking for at all. Because here's the thing, the primary target of that expedition wasn't the Samuel B Roberts. It was the aircraft carrier Gambier Bay. The Gambier Bay was an escort carrier, one of the larger American ships lost during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. A bigger ship, a more visible target on sonar. A vessel that, by most measures, should have been easier to find. That's what the team had come for.
Leyte Gulf, there are 2 wrecks we're looking for. The first is the Samuel B Roberts, which was a very small ship, a destroyer escort. I think it unlikely that we will find the wreck because it is so small, but we're going to give it a shot. The prize, though, is probably the Gambier Bay, which is the aircraft carrier behind me, which was sunk during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the only aircraft carrier in World War II sunk by direct gunfire. The Japanese were able to get it in close range and they sank her. It's possible that she is in even deeper water than the USS Johnston that would make her the deepest wreck in the world. That's why we're going to be spending the majority of our time off of Leyte trying to find her.
But instead, what the submersible found on the ocean floor was this. 3 torpedo tubes, sitting upright on the ocean floor, totally intact. No ship around them, just the tubes. Standing there in the dark at the bottom of the Philippine Sea like someone had placed them there deliberately. And Parks knew immediately what he was looking at. Because this wasn't from the Gambier Bay. Every destroyer and destroyer escort in the Battle of Leyte Gulf carried torpedo tubes. That part wasn't unusual. But the configuration we see here, a single 3-tube mount, now that was different.
I mean, let's look at that. The U.S. destroyers in the battle carried 2 5-tube torpedo mounts. It was the standard configuration for the Fletcher-class destroyer. But the USS Samuel B Roberts, because she was a destroyer escort, built smaller, built lighter, built for a different primary mission, carried a single 3-tube mount. 3 tubes. Of every ship that went down to the bottom during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, American and Japanese, only one carried a 3-tube torpedo configuration, and that was the Sammy B. They had come looking for one of the largest ships in the battle. However, the ocean gave them the smallest one instead. And she had been waiting there the whole time, announcing herself through 3 torpedo tubes on the seafloor, for anyone who knew what they were looking at. The ship was close. They just had to find her. But to understand why finding her mattered, why Park Stephenson spent years refining that search area, why Victor Vescovo dove personally to reach her, you need to understand what happened 78 years earlier. 22,600 feet, or 6,900 meters above where those torpedo tubes were resting. Because what that ship did in the last 2 hours of her life is the reason she deserves to be found. October 25th, 1944. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history. The Japanese had sent their most powerful surface fleet, Center Force, on a final desperate mission. Break through to the American landing beaches in the Philippines. Destroy the invasion before it could take hold. Center Force included the Yamato, the largest battleship ever built. 9 18-inch guns, shells that weighed as much as a small car. And standing between them and those landing beaches, the only American force in their path at the moment was Taffy 3.
I mean, let's look at that for a moment. Taffy 3 was not a combat fleet. It was a small collection of escort carriers, destroyers, and destroyer escorts, all assigned to provide air support for the landing operations. They were not designed or even equipped to fight battleships.
The Sammy B, that's what her crew called her, was a destroyer escort, built to hunt submarines. Less than half the guns of a real destroyer. 1/3 the torpedoes. Not enough speed to outrun what was coming over the horizon. Commander Robert Copeland gathered his crew on the ship's intercom, and he told them the truth. This will be a fight against overwhelming odds, from which survival cannot be expected. We will do what damage we can. That was the speech. No promises, no pep talk. Just the plain truth delivered to 224 men. And then they charged. The ship laid smoke screens to protect the carriers behind her. She fired every torpedo she had. She closed to point-blank range with Japanese heavy cruisers and opened fire with guns that had no business reaching ships that size. Another factor was the confusion she created. The Japanese commander could not get a clear picture of what he was fighting. All of that smoke, all that aggression from ships this small. Center Force actually believed it was engaging a much larger fleet. Cruisers, maybe carriers. And that hesitation bought the men behind Taffy 3 just enough time to survive. The Sammy B bought that time. She took a direct hit from a salvo of heavy shells, She flooded. She lost propulsion. At 10:05 in the morning, less than 2 hours after the battle began, she went under. 89 of her 224 crew never came home. The 120 survivors spent 50 hours in open water before rescue reached them. And then, for 78 years, she was simply gone. In June of 2022, Victor Vescovo and the Caladan Oceanic team returned to the Philippine Sea with Park Stephenson and his search coordinates, and 6 dives planned across 8 days. The torpedo tubes came first.
Dead ahead. It's not huge. 30 meters away.
Ah, I see it. Look,
Yeah. Let's go.
see that?
Yeah.
What is that big piece of steel? It is steel. It is stuck, like buried.
Can you see the top of it?
No,
I can see the top. It's weird that it's standing perfectly up, huh?
yeah. What is that?
Torpedo tubes? Pipes?
Pipes. Yeah.
I think I can see a seat.
You can see a seat. Cannons or what it is. It's maybe from a gun platform, huh?
While I'm doing this, I'm going to increase my range on my sonar. No, I want to see if there's anything else fun out there.
Yeah, but we had a second echo in the vicinity of the first one. Remember on the SATCAM?
Yeah.
So there is another around. This is for sure.
Make sure you get photos. You know, the worst case scenario is that none of the cameras work.
I'm not sure this is pipes actually. It looks like beams, no? Is it rounded? I think this is very likely from a military boat, huh?
It looks, honestly, I think that's torpedo tubes. Hey Jim,
Yeah?
we have just located the deepest known piece of shipwreck.
Really?
Yeah,
It
the,
is.
the Johnston is the deepest known piece of shipwreck.
Okay, so we have a record.
I'm also very nervous because if there's our torpedo tubes,
But I don't see why torpedo tubes will be out of.
because they're sometimes mounted on the deck. So we might not be looking at a piece from the Gambier Bay, this might be from the Samuel B, you know? Because the Sammy B had torpedo tubes on the aft deck, like this. But we'll find out now when we drive around. But if it is torpedo tubes,
It looks like open tubes on the top. You see, on the other side is open.
oh yeah, it's half.
It's half tubes actually.
Yeah. Oh, finally the fucking 4K camera's working well.
Don't you think this is kind of air vents? Being open like that on the top?
Honestly, I've got no idea. Honestly, it looks like torpedo tubes to me. It's got the top's closed and the bottom's open.
Yeah, maybe.
Got lots of good photos.
Not all of them. I have a few good ones, yes.
Okay. We still have time.
Yeah.
So, to be honest with you,
Look at that.
I think, to be honest with you, fuck everyone else.
Yeah?
They're gonna work late.
Yeah?
We're staying down here.
Okay, there's tons of debris around.
So we're going to starboard.
4 days later, on June 22nd, Vescovo dove personally into the search area the tubes had defined. At 6,895 meters, the lights of his submersible swept across a shape in the darkness. She was in two pieces. The keel had broken on impact, but she was there, upright, still carrying the geometry of a warship. Unmistakable. The deepest warship ever discovered, anywhere in the world. 426 meters deeper than the USS Johnston, which had itself just set the record the year before. Two ships, same battle, same morning, found by the same team a year apart. Each one deeper than the world thought possible.
And then Parks described something I hadn't expected, something that changed how I understood what happened to her in those final moments. He pointed to the bow of the ship, the forward section of the hull, and what he described, it's not damage. In fact, it's the opposite of damage.
What we see here is a similar shot of the bow of the Johnston on the left and the bow of the Sammy B Roberts on the right. And you can see a little bit of difference here in what happened to these two ships. Johnston was very thoroughly holed during the battle. She lost all of her watertight integrity, which means that when she sank, the hull equalized very quickly before she got to any kind of crushing depth. Sammy B did not take many hits forward of the bridge. She still had her watertight integrity. And what you can see here with the shape of her bow up toward the stem is imploded compartments. She wasn't able to equalize, and she fell to a depth where it started to crush her hull before something broke and then allowed water in to equalize. So Johnston's bow is largely intact, but it's riddled full of holes. Sammy B's bow is all crumpled and sucked in.
Now, here's what that tells you. Those forward compartments were still sealed when she sank. Still watertight, still intact, still holding air from the surface. From that October morning in 1944, all the way down to 6,895 meters.
The absence of damage to the bow isn't just interesting to me, it's the most precise record of how she died that exists anywhere. More precise than the battle reports, and definitely more precise than the survivor accounts.
And Park Stephenson was the first person to figure all of this out. She's in two pieces, about 10 meters apart on the slope where she came to rest. But the gun mounts are still there. The whole structure is still recognizable. At a depth where most people assumed no intact wreck could survive, the Sammy B is one of the most complete physical records of a World War II surface engagement that exists anywhere on Earth. And the only reason any of this is visible? The torpedo tubes, the compressed bow, the guns, the hull sections. It's all because Park Stephenson spent years in archives making a search area small enough that a submersible could actually cover it.
Now, if you want more stories like this one, the ones that don't make it into the history books, then I hope you'll consider subscribing to History X. Because look, there are more ships down there. And someone, like these guys, they're always looking for them.